And it's kind of an unfortunate situation, but I haven't had to eat over it, and I'm grateful for that. And the situation is, quickly got to a spot of semi-resolution. I don't know what's going to come as things unfold, but yeah, and those were other gifts of the program. I didn't have to make the situation worse than it was already, so I'm grateful for that. But it's good to be here with you all. This is a regular meeting for me, as you know. I have gotten to share my story on it a couple of times, and I've gotten to share my story elsewhere a couple of times. And lately, I have not been planning out what I say, and never do I plan out everything that I'm going to say. Normally, I used to make out some notes, and now I just say whatever comes from my heart, and whatever needs to be said is going to be said today or on that particular day. And those of you who have heard it before will probably hear a couple of things that I probably say every time, and then maybe you'll hear some new things too, because recovery continues to unfold and life continues to develop, as we already know, how I started my share. This is a recent problem that I'm dealing with that I haven't dealt with previously, and that's just life. But yeah, I first came into, and I'm going to jump around, I'm not going to go straight chronological order, but I came into OA the first time. I went to my first meeting in summer of 13. I started coming regularly in spring of 14, and that's when I had my first abstinence, was at that time, and I was abstinent for almost 4 months. And I lost around 50 pounds during that time. And what I did was I allowed the things that OA gave me to take me away from OA, and I prioritized things that weren't my recovery ahead of my recovery, and so I got the opportunity to lose my recovery. And I never left OA completely, but I'd come to meetings with differing frequencies. I had a sponsor, at least one sponsor during that time. I had 30 days of abstinence here and there during that time of relapse, and then I got to return to abstinence in late December of 2016, and so that was December 27th. And so it's been 3 years now, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm going to try to share my screen. I don't know if our meeting allows it, but I've got just a couple of pictures. If I can find it. Let's try this. So let's see here. Move this out of the way. So this first picture, this would have been a couple of months before I came into the program in 14. And then this next picture would be, month or two before I came in back from relapse to be abstinent. And this last picture was last Sunday, Father's Day, me and my little boy. And so for those of you who are just listening to the audio, hopefully you see two pictures of an overweight person and one picture of what I think to be a normal weight person. And I can tell you that all the clothes I'm wearing in the first two pictures, those are far too big for me to wear, and I've long since gotten rid of them. And the clothes I'm wearing in the last picture, honestly, they're probably too big for me too, but they used to be far too small for me to wear. So that much I can tell you. But my compulsive overeating, I'm one of those people who started young. I've acted out on this disease and shown effects of it for as long as I can remember. My mother was a very good cook, and I loved her cooking. My disease changed forms throughout the years. First it was just grazing. Eating big meals. Starting with the afternoon snack when I got home, eating other kids' food at school. I actually have a middle school yearbook in my house that someone said, yes, you can eat my fries. That's how they signed their name in my yearbook. If I get rid of that yearbook, I'm going to take a picture of that so I can remember that that's how I used to be. But then, I would get home and graze and just eat as much as I could at the meal. And then, we had lots of special occasions in my household, and we loved to have people over. And so I would do what you might call binge eating at those occasions. But binging was not something that I really came to identify with for a period of time. I went to my first commercial diet program at the age of 7. I might have been 8, somewhere around there. That was not my idea. You know, I was taught the idea of of compulsive overeating being wrong by my family. If I didn't learn it there, I would have learned it somewhere else. But that is where I learned it, is at home. I come from a family of 4 children. I was the only one that was an abnormal weight. And so I definitely, I heard somebody say in a meeting once that, there's no hell on earth like being a fat kid. Not sure if that's true, but it's not good. And then he also went on to say, I learned that I was just never right, just being present somewhere I was wrong. And I knew what he meant by that. And I can also relate to needing to be smart, to be charming, to be funny, to be helpful, to be anything that I could, because I couldn't be what I thought that I needed to be, which was a normal weight and size. I thought that it was all about that, but in lieu of that, I could try hard at everything else and maybe find, a way to be okay with myself and have others give me their approval. So I went on with that. I discovered, I was put into sports, and in doing sports, I actually swam competitively for 8 years, and it was pretty humiliating to put that speedo on when you're overweight. In high school, I was really more of a normal weight, but I still thought that I was quite overweight. Next time I do the screen sharing, hopefully I can dig up some pictures so you can see what that looks like as well. But at the end of high school, from when the time swim season, somebody's not on mute there. From the time swim season ended to the time I went to even graduation, I gained, I think, 25 pounds because I just decided I wasn't going to care about that anymore. But then I realized I didn't want to look like that. And then I went on another diet. I lost weight before college. And then I discovered drugs and alcohol soon before college. And so I added that into the mix. And I was kind of distracted by that for a period of time, distracted away from the eating or using that to manage my eating, continue to play sports. And then eventually, towards the end of my 20s, I discovered my first 12-step program. And I share that because this is a part of my food story, that I sobered up, entered another commercial food program, and lost the weight again. And then I thought I had life figured out. Here I had these, 12 steps, traditions, meetings. I had, new friends, a new way of life. I figured out the food, or so I thought, and that lasted like 3 or 4 months. And that's how long a diet was able to last for me back then. And then the food came back once again with a vengeance. And eventually it occurred to me that I was eating how I used to drink. And I wondered, is there a 12-step program for food? And OA is the one that I found. And so my first exposure to OA was listening to podcasts. It was reading the Lifeline. And I kind of knew when I started listening to these podcasts, I'm like, these people ate the way I ate. And it kind of scared me because I kind of knew what I was in store for. I had worked a first step before, and I knew that it meant utter defeat. And I just wasn't ready to do that. I wanted to try everything else first. I tried psychological measures. I went to counseling and to a psychiatrist and had, more conditions and more drugs. And I want to say that carefully because I think the doctors and, the medical science is very important. But it wasn't able to get me abstinent. Wasn't able to keep me away from the food, wasn't able to get me happy in and of itself. And, eventually I went to my first OA meeting and I heard some things that were interesting. I heard about the 301 food plan, and people talked about, in that plan, if I only start eating 3 times a day, I only have to stop eating 3 times a day. I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense, But basically, when I first came into OA, I was there to tell people, I know about these 12 steps, I know how it works, I don't need your help. And I didn't need to say that in words, but that's what I was saying in actions. I was saying, stay away from me, I got this. And of course I didn't. I made a deal with myself in 2014. I was like, if I can't do this food plan, this perfectly reasonable 301 food plan, then I'm going to go back to OA. And I don't know if I made it a day. And I went back and I went to this Friday evening meeting in Denver where I was living at the time and where I currently live. And I just looked into the clouds and I asked God to give me just one person to talk to. Because I had remembered from my first meeting, sometimes there was just not much recovery in those face-to-face meetings here in Denver. But there was some recovery back then, just as there is now. But, higher power gave me one person to talk to that night, and that was my first sponsor. And I started working with her, and she had me write a food history, but I was still really trying to do things the way I wanted to do them. And so I needed to relapse for a while. And what ended up happening was I was living in Salt Lake, and I'd gone to some meetings out there, but I was still in relapse. Check the time to see how I'm doing. I'm doing good. Oh yeah, 8+ minutes left. So I came back to visit Denver one November in 16, and that was actually the picture I showed you was with my brother during that trip. I got a phone call a couple of weeks later from my ex-girlfriend who was my ex-girlfriend when I saw her that November, and she was pregnant with my child. And it was soon after that she told me she was going to have a child, and it was soon after that I was able to get into the rooms and stay and be abstinent. And it's not like it was something like, oh, I've got to be abstinent because I'm having a son. It wasn't like that. It was just basically enough to realize that my life was in utter shambles. Now listen, love my son, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But at that time, I was just looking at being in 12-step programs for X period of time, being in relapse from the food, being miserable, and now looking at having a child with someone who I had no intentions of having a child with. And that's just what I guess it took for me to show up and ask for help. And that's what I did. I reached out to my old sponsor in Denver. I started working with her again. And one thing that I was doing, that I've been doing since I came back that I wasn't doing before, was I'm checking in with the sponsor every single day. And the way I do that is email. And I send an email with the food that I ate that day. And I send, and it has my plans for food tomorrow. And it has some, what you would call 10-step inventory. And in the 10-step inventory, I have to say at least 3 things that I did well on any given day, because otherwise I'm just beating up on myself. And when I beat up on myself, I hate myself. And when I hate myself, I'm just going to reach out to the food, which is going to make it worse, but that's just what I'm going to do. So list a few things that I did well, and even on the worst days, there's a good handful of those. And then I list, yes, I'm looking for selfish behavior. Yes, I'm looking for any harm that I did for people. But really, what I want to make sure that I look at is what happened during the day where I was uncomfortable. Why? Because those are the things I'm going to get over. And then I can look at that discomfort and then explore, like, the steps, what that's about. I give that to another human being, my sponsor, and then I give that to higher power as well, and I ask for help with it. And then, what I do to start each day, which is what I did on this very day. I make sure that my bed is made, and it doesn't matter where I am, whether I'm staying somewhere else, whether I'm sleeping on a couch, I'll fold the blanket. Wherever I am, I make the bed, I get down on my knees, and I ask God to protect me from the food. I ask God to protect me from anger, from fear, from self-pity, from dishonesty, food obsession, self-obsession, body obsession, anything that comes to mind, and a lot of it is derived from pages 84 through 88 in the big book. But I have found that praying is not going to keep me abstinent. I've got to be involved with my fellows, and you all are my fellows. So I try to stay in touch with you. I try to find out how other people are doing. I try to be honest with people when I'm not doing great. Because I can tell you, I've gotten down on my knees so many times and asked God to protect me from the food, and then I've been benching by the end of the day. And so, just for me, my experience, not what OA is telling anyone to do, but I've got to seek a spiritual solution, but for me, it's important for me to be connected to my fellows as well. as for doing the actual work, the actual steps, how it worked for me is that that woman I reached out to for help, she has a non-OA approved way of doing the steps. And I went through step 5 with her. And I had a really bad experience in step 5. And I don't fault the method that she was using entirely. I certainly don't fault her entirely. And I don't fault myself entirely, although I believe that we all played a part. And I looked at my part and what that was. And I realized that I was taking it too lightly, and that I have been doing, as the big book talks about, I've been trying to make mortar without sand. You know, I realized that I was moving forward with step 5 without having the firm foundation in the earlier steps. And so after pausing a little bit after the step 5 with that sponsor, I
5 minutes, Matt.
thanks, Roger. I reached out to her, and and I was still in touch with her every day. But in one email, I said, look, I've got this way of going through the steps from the big book, and I'd like to do it around food. And she's like, Matt, if you write it, I will read it. And so that's what I did. I started at the beginning of the big book, and the writing assignments that I knew that I had done in the other program, I did them for food, and that has helped me tremendously. And so that is now how I take anyone else through the steps who is interested. And it's not for everyone. All I can say is that it made an impact for me. And so that's what I choose to share. And if it doesn't work for someone, that's okay. There's a lot of ways to eat in here. There's a lot of ways to work the steps in here. And so these are just the things that I've done. But yeah, I did that work, did another fit step. And I've also done a lot of that work out of the OA 12x12 workbook, which is cool. I love reading about people who have my problem of food, and it helps me to identify. But yeah, I say it in any talk, and really any time I share, if I can mention God and if I can mention the steps, then I'm doing all right. And I'm probably going to regret whatever I said a lot less. So, I think that I've mentioned both of those things here today. And this thing's a journey, and a lot's been left out, but hopefully I've showed that I earned my seat in here. I was miserable and hopeless when I was in the food. I gave it a really good shake on my own. I tried a lot of diets. I tried a lot of things, and if any of those things worked, that's what I would be doing. But this is what's worked for me, and so just for today, it's what I'm still doing. But I can't do it alone, and so I'm just so grateful that you all are here and doing it with me. And thank you for letting me share.
Thanks.